police officers think we're enforcing the law. You're trying to break the law. And here's what, Hoss. Number one, we both enforce the law. You enforce the penal code. I enforce the Constitution. Now, I'm not going to say that my job is more important than your job, but I will say that this country was not founded based upon a penal code. This country was founded based upon the ideals that the Constitution provides. So am I proud to be a part of that? You're damn right I'm proud to be a part of that. The other thing is again, kind of going back to some of the comments, law enforcement, and I have nothing but respect for 95% of law enforcement. Those guys have a very difficult job. It doesn't pay very much. It's risky. It's boring. It goes from one extreme to the other. It's a high-stress job. Some of the best people I know are in law enforcement, for sure. The other side of that coin is some of the worst pieces of shit I have ever stepped on are law enforcement. They're a handful. They're not very many, but they're out there. So don't you dare, Mr. Law Enforcement, think you're superior to a criminal defense lawyer, because you're not. You got a job to enforce the penal code. I got a job to enforce the Constitution. And the last thing, oh, you're here to beat me up. You're here to trick me. You're here to deceive me. You're here to pull the wool over jury. No, I'm not. I'm here to make sure that you do your job right. And if you do your job right, you will have very few questions and very little attitude from me. If you do your job wrong, I'll be so far up your ass on cross-examination, I'll be staring out your navel. So you pick. Do your job right, I'll be respectful, quick, and professional with you. Do your job wrong, we're going to dance.
To add to that, let's say there's a murder or an assassination. As a criminal defense attorney, does most of the evidence, is that in control? Does the police and the law enforcement have control of that? And are you trying to seek the evidence from them, or are you trying to find it on your own? Can you walk us through how that works?
From a scene evidence standpoint, Tommy, I got no control over that, right? If I showed up if my client called me and said I just killed my wife, we were in the driveway and I caught her cheating and I killed my wife, and I showed up and tried to touch the handgun or the phone she had in her hand when she was recording, I'm going to get stuffed and cuffed. They're not going to let me anywhere near that. Okay. So their job is to preserve the integrity of the scene evidence. My job is to make sure they're doing their job, make sure that no one else came there, make sure that nothing's been altered or destroyed or deleted or changed or whatever. So I have zero control over what the scene evidence is. In terms of investigating other witnesses, sure, that's part of a criminal defense lawyer's job. I would not be doing my job if all I did was looked at an offense report and says, well, Miss Jones says X, Mr. Smith says Y, and Miss Philibus says Z, it must be X, Y, and Z. I mean, that my job begins after their investigation ends, right? It's really the beginning of my investigation when their ends.
And there's so much more in this exact topic that I, obviously with topical, stories that I want to dig into, but has there ever been a scenario where you have gotten to like a crime scene before the law, like the police?
No.
There's never been that.
And there's been opportunities for me to do that, but that's the last thing I would want to do, right? Yeah. Because then I'm a witness, and I can't be a witness and a lawyer, right? Mm-hmm. I had a situation, a horrible, tragic situation years ago where my client shot his wife, left her to die, and then called me and said, hey,
so
man,
you were the first call?
I was the first call.
Okay.
Said, I just shot Susie, not her name, and I'll meet you at a restaurant, right? And I didn't know this guy. And so I'm on my way to the restaurant thinking, shit, is Susie dead? Is she going to make it? Did he call for an ambulance? What are we doing? Then somebody else called me who actually referred me to him. And I said, is this guy pulling my leg? He's like, no, dude, he just killed his wife. Wow. So I had the ethical dilemma of this woman could survive. If she gets attention quick enough, but I can't call and violate the attorney-client privilege and say, hey, her husband just called me and she shot her. Make sure you get to the scene. So I had to create this artifice, and it was the best I could do under the circumstances of calling another lawyer and say, hey, man, would call from a blind number and make an anonymous 911 call, but get an ambulance over there now. Right? And morally, was that the right thing to do? Absolutely. Legally, ethically, representationally, was it the perfect thing to do? I don't know. I really don't. They don't teach you that shit in law school.
I was about to ask, so they don't teach you.
No, they don't teach you that.
So how do you walk that tightrope? You just have to
just do the best you can. Fuck. It's like a long prison sentence. You just do the best you can.
Yeah, that's definitely another shirt that we gotta get. But
not to take you too sidetracked by the story, but so let's stick with the crime scene. Like, so if there is a crime scene, and the police gather evidence, does the lawyer at all deal with that evidence, or are they just sticking with the witnesses?
Well, no, you deal with the evidence and you make sure it's marshaled, bagged, tagged correctly, and identified and processed and all that.
And do you review it?
Sure, of course you do.
And is it difficult to obtain that from officers?
No,
okay.
It used to be.
It used to be.
But we were talking off camera about the Michael Morton Act, but before the late 90s, early 2000s, your rights as an accused citizen in the state of Texas were virtually non-existent. All the police had to give you back then was your client's statement, if your client made a statement, and give you access to the physical evidence, photographs, guns, bullets, whatever. That's it. They didn't have to, under the Code of Criminal Procedure as it was then enacted. They didn't have to give you witness statements. They didn't have to give you transcripts. They didn't have to do. They didn't have. And there was a horrible case, Michael Morton, who was convicted of a crime he literally did not commit. He was convicted of murdering his wife, and the prosecutor there in that county failed to turn over exculpatory evidence. There was another guy who actually did it, who years later they found and did it. But he did 25 years for murdering his wife when he didn't do it.
Wow.
Through that tragedy, the state of Texas enacted the Michael Morton Act, which oversimplified, basically gives us, if the DA's office has it, we get it. That's a little bit of an oversimplification, and there's limits on what we can do with it and who we can share with it and how and all that. But we get that discovery now, Tommy. It didn't used to be that way. And it was just a horrible situation. It was rife with misconduct. It was rife with wrongful convictions. There were, I still believe, probably, gun to my head, 3 to 5% of the people that are convicted are wrongful convictions.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Which sounds low until you figure out how many fucking people are in prison in the United States. We imprison more per capita than any other country by far. So, there are hundreds of thousands of people in jail for something they didn't do, right? So that's a windy way of saying that as a defense lawyer, you can't ever sit on your ass and hope the cops did it right and just take their word for it. That's not what you do.
To get back to the relationship here between lawyers and criminal defense attorneys specifically and cops, right? It's law and order, right? So there's a harmony that has to exist between you and police officers.
Yeah.
And you're uniquely positioned to, discuss some of those situations and stories. Do you feel like you have any advice, or not necessarily advice, or just ideas of how it could coexist a little bit more effectively than how it coexists today, or how it has in the past?
Aaron, that's a good question. It's kind of like, why can't the T-SIPs and the Aggies get along? Why can't UT and A&M get along? It's always been that Hatfield-McCoy relationship. I do not start off with an antagonistic mindset towards law enforcement. I think the vast majority of law enforcement does their job. It's a difficult job. I respect it and I appreciate it. I don't think you can say the same thing about law enforcement. If you ask them, what pops into your mind when you think of criminal defense lawyers, to your average, patrol cop, piece of shit, liar, fuck, it's just not. That doesn't mean anything in the context of what happens in a courtroom, but I think the culture of law enforcement is understandably sure they protect and serve, but they also got to exist, right? And there's a band of brotherhood, or the thin blue line, or whatever we want to call it, and those guys look after their own, right? And that's just the way it's been. And oftentimes, or many times, to a fault, right? They let others get away with shit that they shouldn't let other cops get away with. Again, that's not an indictment of the profession, wide, but I don't know, other than, it's just like one day at a time. I try to be respectful. I've ran into a police officer the other day that I cross-examined for years. He was a DWI task force guy, C.E. Green. We went at it for a decade, right? When I was trying a bunch of those cases, I happened to run into him on the street the other day. Mr. Cogdell, how are you, man? Good to see you, Charlie. How are you? And he was always respectful. Now, he had his line to deliver and his punch if he could. Never lied. He was always honest. He wasn't a dumbass. He wasn't going to give it up unless you asked him the right way at the right time with the right question. But I had an awful lot of respect for him, still do. And I think the same is true from him. I never accused him of any misconduct. I never didn't go over the top. I never wasn't anything but professional to him. But how do defense lawyers make it better with law enforcement or vice versa? I think you just eat that elephant one bite at a time. You be professional, you be thorough, and you be respectful, and hopefully they will too.